Hello everyone, welcome. I hope you're all doing well. In this lesson we are going to continue to look at verbs that end in RE. In this lesson specifically we'll look at the verb entendre, which primarily means to hear in French. It can also mean to understand. So in this lesson we'll learn how to conjugate and pronounce this verb. We'll also look at some examples. We'll practice using it a little bit, and then I'll give you an idea towards the end how you can begin to use this verb to think a little bit more only in French. So the verb entendre belongs to the third conjugation group in the present tense. It ends in RE, and technically this group is for irregular verbs that don't really follow a pattern, so you basically have to memorize these verbs, but this verb in particular does follow a regular pattern. Actually, there are several verbs, although they're in the irregular verb category, if they end in DRE, they follow a regular pattern of pronunciation. So are there regular RE verbs? Well, yes and no. Technically, no, but there are a few that follow a regular pattern. They end in DRE, like entendre. So let's look at the endings for the verbs that follow this pattern. If your subject is je, then the ending will be an S. If it's tu, the ending will also be an S. If your subject is il, elle, or on, you do not add anything to the root. So there's no ending. If it's nous, it's ons, on. If it's vous, it's easy. And then if your subject is il or elle, then it's ENT. So you have to memorize these endings. There's really no way around it. You also have to know that before you can add these endings, you have to remove the RE from the infinitive to get the root or the stem. So again, it's the verb entendre, and if I remove the RE, this is my root or my stem, same thing, root or stem. And then you add those endings onto this to conjugate the verb. So let's do it for the practice. I have my root and I just add the ending. Remember, you have to memorize it, so it's just S for verbs that end in DRE. So we have j'entends, j'entends, I hear. So we have our root here and we add the ending for tu, and we have tu entends, tu entends, you hear. Il, elle, or on, it's just the root. Remember, there's no ending. So, il entend, elle entend, on entend. For nous, here's the root, and we add the new ending, which is ons. Nous entendons, nous entendons, nous entendons. We hear. Vous, there's my root, add the ending, easy. Vous entendez, vous entendez. Il or elle, there's my root, and then add the ENT ending, which you have memorized. So we have ils entendent, they hear. Elles entendent, they hear. Let's go over the pronunciation once more. J'entends, tu entends, il entend, elle entend, on entend, nous entendons, vous entendez, ils entendent, elles entendent. Notice the difference in pronunciation from the first three here to the last three. Entend, 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 entendons, entendez, entendent. So now that you know the forms, the next step is to let's put it in context. Let's practice a little bit with it. So I can say things like j'entends la musique, which means I hear the music. J'entends de la musique, I hear some music. So the difference here is you're hearing some specific type of music. Maybe you've talked about it. J'entends la musique. If you say j'entends de la musique, you're just hearing music, some music. And then the last one here, un bruit bizarre, a strange noise. Bruit is a noise, and bizarre, of course, bizarre or strange. So you could say something like, I hear a strange noise. J'entends un bruit bizarre. You can also use a different subject. You could say you hear, tu entends. You hear the music, tu entends la musique. You hear some music, tu entends de la musique. You hear a strange noise, tu entends un bruit bizarre. He hears, il entend. He hears the music, il entend la musique. He hears some music, il entend de la musique. He hears a strange noise, il entend un bruit bizarre. She hears, elle entend. She hears the music, elle entend la musique. She hears some music, elle entend de la musique. She hears a strange noise, elle entend un bruit bizarre. One hears, on entend. One hears the music, on entend la musique. One hears some music, on entend de la musique. One hears a strange noise, on entend un bruit bizarre. We hear, nous entendons. We hear the music, nous entendons la musique. We hear some music, nous entendons de la musique. We hear a strange noise, nous entendons un bruit bizarre. You hear, vous entendez. You hear the music, vous entendez la musique. You hear some music, vous entendez de la musique. You hear a strange noise, vous entendez un bruit bizarre. And finally, ils entendent, elles entendent. They hear. They hear the music. Ils entendent la musique. Elles entendent la musique. They hear some music. Ils entendent de la musique. Elles entendent de la musique. They hear a strange noise. Ils entendent un bruit bizarre. Elles entendent un bruit bizarre. Okay, so that's the practice section. So now the last part of the video. So the question is, how can you begin thinking in French? If your native language is English or some other language, how do you begin thinking in French? Because you do want to avoid translation all the time. That's double the work, so you don't need to do that. Here's the suggestion. If you know that entendre means to hear, and you know that j'entends, for example, means I hear, you don't need to translate that part. You know what it means. So all you have to do is just use your imagination a little bit. Don't underestimate the power of your imagination. So imagine that close your eyes and imagine that you're hearing. You're hearing. And let's say you hear music playing, then you could say, j'entends de la musique. I hear some music. So now imagine you hear your friend and your friend is talking. So you could say, oh, I hear my friend. J'entends mon ami. J'entends mon ami. Imagine that you hear an airplane fly over. You could say, ah, j'entends un avion. If you know the word for bird, oiseau, you could say, oh, I hear a bird. J'entends un oiseau. So that's the work for you to do. Just use your imagination and try to practice as much as you can. Say it out loud. And of course it goes without saying, don't translate. Just stick to the French and you can begin thinking a little bit completely in French and practicing what you know. That's it for this lesson. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, I would appreciate it very much if you'd give it a like. If you know of someone else who's learning French and you think this might benefit them, please share. And of course, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Thanks again. To continue learning, click on the video that appears here on your screen to go to another lesson. And I'll see you soon. À bientôt.